Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Joshua Bridwell Show. This is the podcast where I talk about your personal, professional, and spiritual growth, and where we talk about your stories to help you go from stuck to growth. I am your host, Joshua Bridwell, and today I'm going to be talking to you about toxic positivity. Is positivity something that can even be toxic? When something's going wrong in your life and somebody says, hey, just stay positive, or it could always be worse, how does that make you feel? Oftentimes, it can make a situation worse than making a situation better. I've done that to other people. Other people have done that to me. Sometimes it's easier for us to throw a positive comment out there than it is to just sit in our hard emotions or even somebody else's hard emotions. I want you to ask yourself if that's something that you've done to somebody else. How did they respond to that? Because positivity, when it's forced or when it's fake, is actually something that can be really detrimental to our lives. It can actually hold us back from growth. And we're going to get into that. So, toxic positivity is the idea that no matter what's happening, no matter how hard it is, no matter how painful it is, that you are just supposed to stay positive. It's the good vibes only mentality for those that are listening and not watching. I put those in quotations. The good vibes only mindset that has been taken to a really far extreme where anything other than positivity is a problem. And I want to push back on that because positivity isn't bad. It's actually a good thing in the right context. But when positivity itself becomes a way to avoid real emotions that are important for our well-being, our growth, our relationships, when positivity becomes a way to avoid all of that or to shut down any tough conversations, that's when positivity gets toxic. I want to paint you a picture. I want you to imagine that you are going through something that's really tough for you. Maybe that's a breakup, maybe that's losing a job, maybe that's losing a loved one, or maybe you're just feeling stuck. You finally get the courage to share how you are feeling with somebody else. And instead of just sitting with you in that moment, they hit you with the, oh, well, look on the bright side, or everything happens for a reason. How does that feel for you? Because if I put myself through that same exercise, my response is going to be a little hurtful. It's going to feel like a slap in the face. And like I just opened up to you, and instead of hearing me, you're trying to sweep it underneath the rug, which, remember from our last episode, everything that gets swept under the rug comes out at the most inconvenient time. But when you're trying to sweep it under the rug with some one-liner, it's toxic positivity. Be careful of that. And you know what else is crazy? Research actually backs this up. A 2018 study in the Journal of Experimental Psychology found that suppressing emotions, like forcing yourself to stay positive, can actually make you more stressed and anxious. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It's going to surface. It needs to surface. The more that you try to hold that underwater, the harder it's going to be. Eventually, you're going to give up, and then it's going to pop back up, and usually it pops back up right in your face. I want to tell you about a time that I have actually fallen for this myself. A couple of years ago, I was really burned out. If you are looking, or if you want to find a king at burning themselves out, it has been me in the past. Do I still burn myself out? Sure, sometimes. I like to take on more than I can handle. I like to stretch myself. Sometimes that can be a little bit of a problem, but during this time, I was juggling work, relationships, personal projects, school projects, all sorts of different things. And I was at the point where I had just had it. But instead of me asking for help, I kept telling myself, oh, it's fine. It's just for a season. You'll get over it. Don't worry about it. Keep going. Just push through. That was a problem because I can imagine that if any of you have burned out, taken on more than you can chew, you probably guess how all of that ended. One night, I ultimately hit a wall. And when you keep taking on more and more and more, the wall that you hit is usually a pretty hard hit. I was sitting in my car after a really long day, and I broke down. I was sitting in my driveway. My wife actually had to come out and ask if I was okay, and I realized in that moment that all of the stay positive stuff that I had been feeding myself and I've been hearing and I've been seeing all over social media wasn't helping me at all. It was actually giving me permission to burn myself out. What I really needed to do is I needed to stop, I needed to feel what I was doing, and I needed to deal with it. The moment that all of this was going on, it taught me a really valuable life lesson that I'm now sharing with you is sometimes the healthiest, most positive thing that you can do in your life is to admit to yourself and admit to other people that you are not okay. That's where real growth starts. That is where real healing starts. It's not with pretending that everything is fine, but it's about being honest where you are. For example, the second stage of stuck is about people that are afraid to admit where they really are. You have to be honest with yourself if you are going to grow. Speaking of personal growth, if you're constantly telling yourself to just be positive, you're not really dealing with any of the stuff that's holding you back. Sure, you might hear something on social media that tells you otherwise, but it's not true. You can try it. You can see what happens for yourself, or you can listen to this word of wisdom. If you are just telling yourself to just be positive, you are not dealing with the stuff that's holding you back, and you are headed for a cliff. And real growth requires honesty. It requires looking at the parts of yourself or your life that aren't working, and you have to be willing to sit in that discomfort. A lot of us hide from reality because we know that it's going to be uncomfortable. But I want to challenge you to just be honest with yourself. You don't even have to tell anybody else. Just be honest with yourself. That is a really important step in just getting started in your growth journey, because if you're not honest with yourself, then you don't have a clear, accurate baseline to tell how much you have grown or even what your first step should be to grow outside of just being honest. And here's something that a lot of people don't realize. Yes, sitting in discomfort is really important. It's important to know that what you feel in that moment isn't bad. In fact, negative emotions aren't bad. They are actually really important. They're like a check engine light in your car. We get really stressed out when we see a check engine light come on in our car because we think, okay, well, it's really expensive to fix. Maybe sometimes it might be a really quick and easy fix, but it tells us that something's not right. And if we ignore that check engine light, just like if we ignore our negative emotions, you're not fixing the problem. You're just setting yourself up for a bigger breakdown later. Your check engine light is telling you to slow down, and the Bible even backs this up. If we look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 4, it says, "There is a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance." You see, even Jesus wept. He, in the most stressful times of his life. And before anyone out there says, well, Jesus didn't have a whole lot of tough times in his life. He was perfect. He's God. Jesus had all the same temptations that we had. He fought all the same temptations, and he got stressed out like we did. He got so stressed out that he started to bleed or to sweat blood. And even Jesus wept. He didn't run and try to slap a positive spin on his emotions. He let himself feel the weight of the moment. And if he can do that, why do we think that it's okay for us to just pretend like everything is fine? Real personal growth comes from sitting in those hard emotions, learning from those hard emotions, and letting them shape you into something stronger. Gold is refined in the fire. This isn't just something that is a construct that only affects our personal lives. It can seep its way into the workplace. If you're an entrepreneur or if you're somebody that has any influence on your company culture, I really want you to hear me during this segment because I want to talk about how toxic positivity shows up in the workplace because it's in more places than you think it is. If you've heard a company slogan like failure isn't an option, or we don't focus on problems, we focus on solutions, that is a pretty toxic culture. On the surface, it might sound like a really healthy culture, but if you dig deeper, then these companies create a culture where people feel like they can't be honest about the struggles that they have or about the mistakes that they're making because they always have to stay positive. We've already talked about why it's important for us to sit in negative emotions. And if we look at a study from Harvard Business Review, it found that workplaces with a positivity at all costs culture had a higher burnout and a higher turnover rate. It's because people didn't feel safe. We want to create a culture of feedback and creating a culture where people feel safe to grow. And if all you're focusing on is positivity, then real growth's never going to happen. If you can't say, hey, I'm struggling, or hey, I don't think that this plan that we've put together is working, then how can you grow during that? As leaders or even as teammates, we need this space for tough, difficult, and sometimes negative conversations. If we look in Philippians chapter 2, verse 3, it says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself." That is what good leadership is all about. It's about listening, it's about supporting, it's about being willing to admit when things are not perfect, when things are not always positive. I see so many companies. I was the president of the Collegiate Entrepreneurs Organization down at the University of Texas, San Antonio. And as that, I got to work with a lot of early startups. I got to teach them about mission, vision, values, the development of culture. I've actually worked with other companies while I was down in San Antonio. They brought me in. And if you don't think that companies out there struggle with this, let me tell you, you are wrong. I see it a lot. If you are somebody that works for a company like this, I want you to encourage some pushback. Maybe share this episode with leaders that have the ability to make a difference within the culture. I believe that we are all culture creators, but not all companies have that same viewpoint. It's really important to recognize toxic positivity in the workplace for us to push back against that in order to create actual results and actual growth and create cultures where people feel safe. Hear me out. And here's something that people don't often recognize about emotions. Emotions themselves are not good or bad. They are just signals. They tell our body to either speed up or slow down. And a lot of us think that anger is a bad thing, but it's really just your body It's your body's check engine light saying, hey, something's not right here. It's the same thing with sadness. It's a signal for you to slow down, for you to reflect, and in some cases, it might mean that you need to let go of something. But we need to listen to those. And Dr. Susan David, a psychologist who wrote Emotional Agility, has a quote that I shared with my wife because I love this quote a lot. Discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life. I want you to let that sink in. Discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life. If we ultimately want a life that is rich to us, it's full, it's fulfilling, we cannot avoid discomfort. Because if we try to avoid discomfort, the discomfort will ultimately become the discomfort. It's all a part of the process. We have to lean in and we have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I'm sure you've heard that before. And a 2017 study in Emotion backs this up. It found that people who accept their emotions, and I'm talking about people that accept their emotions without judgment, which is hard to do sometimes, but it's important for us to practice that. People that accept their emotions without judgment actually experience less anxiety and less depression. So, the next time that you're facing something hard, instead of trying to push it away, instead of trying to sweep it under the rug, trying to name it, say, I feel frustrated, or this is really sad for me. Acknowledge the emotion because that's going to make a huge difference in your life. You have to be able to recognize that emotions in and of themselves are not good, they're not bad, they are signals for your body. So, how can you ultimately avoid falling into the trap that is toxic positivity? First, you have to give yourself permission to feel. It's weird for us to have to give ourselves permission to do something. Sometimes that might mean that we have to give ourselves permission to feel, like in this case, we have to be able to forgive ourselves. We have to give ourselves permission to do X, Y, and Z. But first, you have to give yourself permission to feel. If you're having a bad day, that's okay. That's normal. Don't sweep it under the rug. It's gonna pop up. Don't try to hold that beach ball underwater. It's gonna pop up, hit you in the face. If you're having a bad day, that's okay. You're not failing. You're just human. Second, when somebody else tells you that they're struggling, don't try and fix it. If you're like me, I love solutions. I love problem solving. I love taking on new challenges. It took me a long time for me to understand that when my wife has a problem, she doesn't necessarily want me to fix it. She wants me to just sit there and to listen. After, and this is a pro tip, took me a long time to figure this out too. After somebody has explained their issue to you or why they're struggling, you can say, okay, do you want me to be involved? Do you want me to just listen? Or are you looking for a solution? Being able to decipher between those, and it's important that you ask after the conversation because you don't want the person that you're speaking with to have the, oh, okay, well, they're just going to listen for their own agenda. You need to be able to ask that question afterwards. Don't try and fix it right away. Find out what it is that they're needing. But I encourage you, if you don't ask that question, if you don't remember that, if somebody else is struggling, just listen. Don't try to fix it. Don't say, it could be worse, or, oh, that sounds really hard. I'm here for you. Actually, just listen to them. And if you are a Christian, if you're a believer, I want to encourage you to finally turn to Scripture for perspective. And so, primarily looking at Psalms, because if you want to get just raw, honest emotions in the Bible, turn to Psalms. We see anger, fear, sadness, hope, joy. David doesn't hold back with God. And we don't have to either. Psalms 34, chapter 18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." That is real comfort, not toxic positivity. So here's my challenge for you. The next time that you are trying to post a positive vibes only bumper sticker on somebody else's struggle, I want you to pause yourself and ask yourself this question. What's really going on here? Don't just try to be positive, try to understand. I'm not saying never be positive, but I'm saying don't let positivity be forced and don't let positivity be faked. Growth is not about pretending that everything in your life is fine. It's about being real with yourself, real with others, and it's about being real with God. So, if you have found this episode helpful, go ahead, subscribe, share this, like it, comment. Just make sure that you're staying involved, staying tuned in, because we've got a lot of really great content coming up. And we also have some awesome projects in the works. Managed to get my wife on board to help me with designing something really, really great coming up for y'all within the next year. So make sure that you stay tuned in. And this has been another episode of the Joshua Bridwell Show. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay authentic, keep moving forward. You got this. Tune in next time. Let's grow.